another edition of the Lowdown in 15. It's actually our third edition and I'm really excited about it. Today we're going to be talking about sunglasses, a requirement for the kingdom. Before I go into that, I still want to tell you thank you for every review, every comment, every feedback that has come in. Keep the mail coming in. It's really encouraging. And I want to say thank you again and thank you for going on this journey with me. As I said, the title of today's message is Sunglasses, a requirement for the kingdom. And have you noticed my eyes? This is a whole artwork on its own. They say when your eyes look like this, they're popping. So, yes, I concentrated on my eyes today because for today, when I'm talking about sunglasses, yes, we're going to talk about sight and we're going to talk about vision. And then I encourage you today, please and please, take the journey with me. Let's take it step by step and see where it leads us to, right? And yes, I am going to start with definitions as usual, but today's definition, the first one, is vision. And vision is defined as the state of being able to see. Another definition says the ability to plan for the future. Then we've got the definition for sight, which I absolutely love. In fact, when I checked it and I saw it, I was like, wow. It says the power of seeing. And that could be the power in seeing. You know, seeing on its own has power. You know what it is to wake up and you're in a dark room, probably a room you don't know, and you're supposed to step maybe even to the bathroom. How does it feel? It feels so out of place, doesn't it? So imagine that physically, and then imagine that spiritually. That took me to Joseph. You know, very early in life, Joseph had a dream. He saw a vision and he had a dream that he held on to. But you see, because he saw that and he held on to it, it stayed Joseph through every trial he went through. So much so that when Joseph was described as a prisoner going into Egypt, the Bible described Joseph as a prosperous man. Then let's look at how the Gideon's army was chosen. The final 300 in the Gideon's army were chosen because they understood the validity or the necessity of them seeing and the necessity of them being aware of their environment. They did not throw down their focus to focus just on what was going into their mouth, to focus on just scooping up the water. They understood the power of seeing, the power of sight, and the power of being aware. Very early in the Bible, we talk about sight. In Genesis, when Lot had separated from Abraham, the Lord said to Abraham after Lot had gone, "Look as far as you can see in every direction, north, south, east, and west. I'm giving you all this land." And the Lord repeats himself. He says, as far as you can see, to you and your descendants as a permanent possession. What Abraham was getting as a possession was dependent on what he was able to see. Can you see the power of seeing? Then look at Luke 6, when the Lord was describing the Pharisees as being blind. He said, "Can the blind lead the blind? Shall they not both fall into the ditch?" In this case, the blindness denoted an absence of understanding. They were without understanding of the truth. They could not discern, they could not understand that the prophecy of old was being fulfilled right before their eyes. They could not see that the Messiah was before them. You know, in my church family, we started off the year very powerfully. I can say it for free. The father of the house, he don't play. We started off the year from crossover night with eyesight, insight, and foresight as our message. You know, and he still has those podcasts that he does based on revelation of eyesight, insight, and foresight, where eyesight is the ability to see, insight is the capacity to understand, and foresight being the ability to see what will happen in the future and plan accordingly. Today, in order to take this journey to get to how sunglasses are a requirement, I'm going to be concentrating on insight, the capacity to understand. Now, when you look at the different synonyms that go with insight, you have things like intuition, we have things of perception, awareness, discernment, understanding. So what we see is important, but how we see is as important. In fact, I stand to say that how we see determines what we experience, and it also determines what the world around us experience. Have you ever heard the saying, you're being starry-eyed? That means you're being idealistic, but without any foundation of truth to your idealism. Or when you say take off your rose-colored glasses, that means see the situation for what it is. Don't paint it as what it's not. Another version of that could be wake up and smell the coffee. That's another version. In other words, see things for what they are. Because it is possible for two people to see the same thing, but the way they perceive it is different. And believe me, your perception can determine the result you're going to get from either that situation or what you're seeing. Let's look at ourselves, for instance. The way you look at yourself actually determines the way you carry yourself. The way you look at yourself determines your self-esteem. Now, the way other people look at you determines how they treat you. I'm not so much talking about respect. Even as one person as you are, like me, for instance, someone else may look at me as a sister. Another person may look at me as a friend. Another person may look at me as a relative. Another one may look at me as a mother, an acquaintance. Depending on how they see you, that's how they treat you. The power of sight. Walk with me here. Now look at the story of David and Goliath. Do you notice the way David saw Goliath that determined his outcome, that determined that he was going to be a victor? Where other Israelites saw Goliath as a threat, David saw Goliath for who he was, an uncircumcised Philistine that had the audacity to challenge the armies of Israel, to challenge the armies of God. Look at Joshua and Caleb. There were 12 spies that were sent into the promised land. But as every other spy saw themselves as grasshoppers, Joshua and Caleb separated themselves by the fact that they saw that this was not too hard for their God. And therefore, they were the ones that entered into the promised land. Coming to ourselves, let's talk about it today. How do we see offense? The Lord tells us that offense will surely come. But believe me, the outcome of offense is determined by how you see offense. That is where we get the statement, take offense. It's a choice to either take it or drop it. Or you take it or you leave it there. But you look at offense, do you look at it as something being done to you? Or something being done for you? Does the situation make you check yourself to say, what needs to be pruned here? What needs to be cut off here? It determines your outcome. Either you become bitter or you become better. Now you look at it now, even in our prayer life. How do you see God when you go into prayer? Do you see God as the Father that He is? Do you see Him as the source and the king? Or do you see Him as a sugar daddy? It's the mother of the house that will say, if you go to God as a sugar daddy, that's you're going with a shopping list. This is what determines my relationship with God. If He does this, I will do that. How do we see God? How did David see being in the cave of Abdullah? I always mix that up. He's in that cave, and there were men that were brought to him, men that were destitute in every situation. Did he say, woe is me? Or he faced it and built those men up to men of valor? It was very dependent on how he saw the situation. Let's come to where we are today. We're coming out of a season that has been called the lockdown season, a season of quarantine. And the voices that are predominant of speaking of God's voice are talking about repositioning, are talking about realigning, are talking about a refocusing. But all that, getting the result of that is dependent on how we saw what we were in during this period. Did we take it as a period of stagnation, or did we take it as a period of strengthening, of putting our feet down in the spiritual realm? That will determine what outcome we're going to get. Now let's look at it now. Walk with me as I said. Why did I relate it to sunglasses? In physical sight, there are 3 particular ailments, because when I looked into physical sight, there's so many ailments that concern the eye. But there are 3 particular ones I want to pick up on and relate that as we do to spiritual sight. We have the nearsightedness, farsightedness, and astigmatism. Where nearsightedness is your ability to see things that are near, but things that are far from you are harder. And farsightedness, of course, is the reverse of that. But astigmatism is when you are not able to focus on one thing, you focus on two things. In physical sight, all these three can be corrected by contact lenses or by glasses. Now let's look at the spiritual side of things. I thought of it, we have a chapter in the Bible that was written by Peter. It says 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 9. And when you come to the summary of that, he says, for he who lacks these things is short-sighted, even to blindness, and has forgotten that he was cleansed from his old sins. According to Peter here, a character deficient Christian is short-sighted. You see, here he stated that a character deficient Christians are blind at the present moment, short-sighted about the future, and forgetful of God's grace in the past. Look at it today, or look at, certain stories in the Bible that can depict that. The Pharisees were blind at present situation. They did not see the Messiah. The young ruler that came up and asked, what do I do to ensure that I can enter into the kingdom of heaven? And was told to go and sell off all that belongs to him. He only saw what he had in his hand at that moment. He didn't look at the eternal. That is being short-sighted. And look at the wicked servant whom owed his master such a debt, and the master forgave. But stepping out of that, he could not forgive his fellow servant. Isn't that a forgetfulness of the grace of his master that he enjoyed? Going further, I still want to look at these three things and look at the story of the prodigal son. The prodigal son that went away could be termed as one that was short-sighted. He wanted instant gratification. I want my inheritance now. He didn't think of the implication of what he was doing. He didn't think of what he was going to do with the inheritance. He didn't think of the pain it caused the father. He just took the inheritance. When he was coming back, and the Bible tells us he came to himself, he didn't think of the father in that situation. What he was thinking is that, let me go. Even the servants eat better in my father's house. But when he got to his father restored him as a son. Now look at the older brother that stayed with the father. His mindset was still wrong, because then it was as if he was waiting for the father to pass away before he could rule. But the father restored him by saying, all that I have is yours, meaning you are ruling at that time with me. Now look at when you talk of astigmatism. As believers, our focus is supposed to be one. Our focus is supposed to be kingdom, because the Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and every other thing will follow. It's the same thing as saying you can't serve God and serve mammon. You have to serve one. You must be single focused. Now, how does sunglasses come into play here? You see, what I meant by sunglasses, when you begin to see yourself as a son, you put on your sunglasses, because that's what gives you clarity and precision. That's what restores you to being a son. Seeing yourself as a son is one whom it's the Father's love that defines you. It's not the poor choices that you have made, and it's not other people's opinion, but you begin to see yourself as a son. And when you do put on those sunglasses and see yourself as a son, you begin to rule as a son. You begin to walk like a son. You begin to see as the Father sees. Putting on your sunglasses takes away the slave mentality, and you're able to be who the Father called you to be. Look at David. David fought the bear and the lion to protect the sheep. He was being a son. When you steward your gifts and talents and use them as you serve, you multiply them. That's being a son, because you're not having a spirit of ownership, but it's a spirit of stewardship, a spirit of sonship. You begin to see people with the eyes of the Father. You begin to see people with love. You don't see them with their past, but you begin to see them with destiny. Just like when the woman that was caught in adultery was brought before Jesus, when everyone stepped away, he said, daughter, get up. He did not wait. It was not a process that made him accept her with love. We begin to see people like that. You walk in the confidence that you are defined by the Father's love, and you know that he's pleased with your being. When you look at it, when Jesus was baptized in the river and he came out, when the baptism of John, As he came out, he had not performed the miracle. He had not done anything. His ministry had not started. But the Father said, this is my Son in whom I'm well pleased. Because our Father is pleased with us in being. It's not in the doing. It's not in the performance. We begin to see people with a love. And it is that love that begins to give us authority. Now, do you agree with me that each and every one of us need to put on our sunglasses? Yes, I want to hear from you about this. This really excited me. As you can see, I really did it up this time. And next episode that I do have, I do need your help on this one. I'll be speaking about worship, and the topic comes in the form of a question. Did you enjoy worship today? But what I would really like from you to either send me an email, thelowdownin15@gmail.com. If you check down, you'll see the contact details there. And what I would love from you is if you can please write down your favorite worship song, but most importantly, why is that your favorite worship song? Once again, I am Ursula. I hope I did engage you today. I hope I got a message across. Please write me. Let me know your opinion about this. And don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share. Like the video. Join me on this journey. Let's do this. Let's go there. Thank you very much.